Barack Obama arrives in Greece on his final foreign trip as U.S. president. How smartphones are being used to screen women for cervical cancer in Tanzania. And while much of the world anxiously awaits to see what happens under U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, one factory manager in Japan is all smiles. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. U.S. President Barack Obama has been formally welcomed to Greece's presidential mansion in Athens, where the president met with Greek leaders Tuesday on the first leg of the final planned foreign trip of his presidency. Obama was greeted at the palace by Greek President Prokopis Apostolopoulos and a marching band. The two men reviewed the honor guard outside the palace and greeted Greek officials before brief talks. From there, Obama met with Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras. Their talks were about continued economic reform. The president thanked the prime minister and his government for welcoming him to the birthplace of democracy and noted the long-standing relationship between the two nations.
We have consistently been able to count on Greece as a friend, an ally, a vital link in NATO and our transatlantic partnership. And I know that from the Greek-American community, they would want me to express our deep affection and abiding friendship with the people of Greece.
Well, Obama also credited the Greek government with bearing the brunt of the refugee crisis, in which waves of immigrants from Africa and the Middle East entered the country from its southern Mediterranean coast and adjoining islands. Obama and Tsipras held a joint news conference after their meeting. Obama will also attend the state dinner. Well, for more on President Obama's visit to Greece, journalist Nick Barnett joins us live via Skype from Athens. Nick, first, the president made it very clear this was very significant to him, visiting Greece, right?
Yes, it was. It is very significant for Greece. The last time that a U.S. president, or that a sitting U.S. president, visited the country was way back in 1999, when then President Bill Clinton visited the country. So that, and combined with the fact that this was the first stop on President Obama's final foreign trip, is also very significant for Greece as well.
Somehow it couldn't avoid answering some questions regarding the election of Donald Trump and comparisons with Brexit. What did he have to say?
Yes, the president did, at a press conference that he did along with the Greek prime minister, he did touch upon that and upon the election of his successor, Donald Trump, making comparisons between the populism that led to Brexit in the UK, and also comparing that to other forms of populism, even such as the more left-wing populism that was mainly in large part responsible for Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras himself coming to power last year, and he also made comparisons about how he handled the 2008 economic crash compared to the way Europe did, and the reasons why Europe is still struggling with many of the things that America has been able to get past in terms of its economy. But he did touch upon the political populism, which is something that both sides of the Atlantic are now dealing with.
And we know for many of our viewers, especially in Africa, they have come to focus a lot on Greece because of the migrant situation. What did the leaders say regarding that situation there?
Well, President Obama he expressed American solidarity for its efforts to handle the refugee crisis as well. He complimented Greece on its tremendous hospitality shown to the tens of thousands of refugees and migrants that are currently being hosted in the country, as well as for the more than 1 million others that have passed through its borders over the past 2 years. And he also expressed that America is willing to do whatever possible it can to help Greece with this crisis, and along with Greece and other countries deeply affected by the crisis of migration right now, to find an appropriate and viable solution to this.
Now, Nick, you've been covering the refugee crisis for some time now. What is the current situation? How is Greece dealing with this issue?
Well, right now, Greece has, for the past few months, has had various refugee centers around the country for the more than 50,000 refugees who are stranded in the country. These are people who came into the country from Turkey before the March deal between the EU and Turkey, to which states that all migrants, regardless of where they're from, will be subject to return. So those that came before March, but after the Balkan countries to the north closed their borders, are stranded here in various centers around the country, as well as some unofficial squats that have sprung up in cities like Athens and Thessaloniki. The government is working very closely with UNHCR and with other organizations like Médecins Sans Frontières and the IOM in order to make sure that in a lot of these refugee centers that there are accommodations in terms of housing, schooling for the children, as well as some basic supplies. But it is, of course, still a work in progress. There are many issues still in many of these centers with improper protection from the elements. A lot of the people in these centers are still living in tents, living in structures that are not fit for, especially for the upcoming winter, where, the weather is already started to get cold and wet here already now. So there are still many issues like that the Greek government is still struggling to deal with in order to accommodate.
And we'll have more details on that. Nick, thank you very much for your reporting today. That's reporter Nick Bonnet coming to us via Skype from Athens. Now, as winter arrives, efforts continue to help the refugees and migrants trapped in Greece following last spring's border closures. But with progress slow, thousands of families are set to face the cold with little more than a tent for protection. John Owens has a report from Athens.
Winter is on the way, and in Greece, many refugees fear the coming cold. Here, in a camp just outside Athens, are some of the 10,000 people living in tents. They are among the thousands who have been stuck in Greece since last spring, and travel to the rest of Europe was stopped by border closings. Father of four, Azizola Sedarat from Afghanistan, is among them.
The cold weather is coming now, and there is no difference if you are in the tent or outside. But they do not bring help. Some countries know we are human, so they will not kill us violently, so we escaped that kind of death. But here we are, dying slowly.
Azizola's family has done its best to make this place feel like home. And this camp is set to swap its remaining tents for cabins in the coming weeks. But many will not be so fortunate. Efforts to help those like Azizola are moving too slowly, says one official working for a leading NGO.
This is now 1 year on in the response, and therefore progress has been slower than would have been anticipated, especially in a context like Europe.
Preparations for the coming months, including the distribution of winter items and the replacement of tents for cabins, are taking place across the country. But thousands will remain stuck in tents or packed in warehouses, and some say the Greek government must shoulder some of the responsibility.
There needs to be a clearer plan to minimise the sites that have poorer conditions and bring people together, consolidate them into sites which have more appropriate living conditions for winter.
Those in this camp have access to services and even an improvised gym. But it is solid walls and warmth that are most in demand.
Adults do not care about falling ill or getting the flu, but for children, it could be fatal. The ground is wet, and the weather is cold.
Free to leave the camp as they wish, many here nonetheless feel trapped. Meanwhile, as the temperatures drop, they continue to wait for help and a chance to forge a more hopeful future. John Owens, VOA News, Athens.
Well, South Africa's main opposition party on Tuesday filed a criminal complaint accusing President Jacob Zuma of corruption. This follows a recent anti-graft watchdog report listing allegations of influence peddling in his government. The report, titled State of Capture, stopped short of reaching conclusive findings against the president. Some of his ministers and heads of state-owned firms but plunged Zuma into the latest crisis of his scandal-plagued presidency. The affair has given even more ammunition to the opposition to try to unseat Zuma. Musi Maimane, Democratic Alliance leader, on Tuesday met with the police to open the case against Zuma.
I have faith in the belief that the provincial office will take this matter. We will not rest. I'll take the matter further on in Parliament, and I want to make sure that the criminal elements will ensure that Jacob Zuma is prosecuted.
Well, Jacob Zuma survived a no-confidence vote in Parliament last Thursday over the allegations of influence peddling with the backing of lawmakers from the ruling ANC. Well, children uprooted by Boko Haram violence have returned to school in various parts of northern Nigeria. A military offensive in the region has driven the Islamic group from much of its former territory, bringing back a sense of security, which has encouraged people to slowly start returning to their homes. Central Primary School is one of the centers housing displaced families who have been camping in the school's playground. Now, about 90,000 children are benefiting from a program that provides them with school kits and uniforms. Boko Haram had vandalized schools and villages, killed and kidnapped thousands of people, and seized parts of northeastern Nigeria by last year. Well, internet freedom declined globally for a sixth consecutive year. The independent organization Freedom House, dedicated to the expansion of freedom and democracy, found that government surveillance of social media and messaging tools was on the rise between June 2015 and June of this year. VOA's Zlatitsa Sahok reports.
The report, titled Freedom on the Net 2016, says internet users in Estonia, Iceland and Canada enjoy the most freedom and protection of privacy. The most abuses of internet freedom were once again recorded in China, followed by Syria, Iran, Ethiopia, Uzbekistan and Cuba.
What the likes of China and Iran have in common is an attempt to gain control over the online sphere within their own countries. And I think we see Russia going towards that direction, which is very troubling.
Russia recently handed down its first maximum prison sentence under the anti-extremism laws for a non-violent political speech, and it imposed a whole spate of laws that restrict privacy and free speech.
There was the passage of the data localization law in previous years, which was implemented in 2015. And that has a very negative effect both on businesses that have their operations in Russia, but also on user privacy in Russia, because all of users' data must be now stored within Russia.
Freedom House finds that Ukraine is not any better than Russia.
In Ukraine, for example, we saw some of the first arrests and even prison sentences for users that are advocating for political causes in a very non-violent way, and yet were sentenced to based on extremism law.
The United States, a great advocate of democracy and freedom of speech, takes fourth place in protection of privacy.
This was due to the passage of the USA Freedom Act, which places some limits on the bulk collection of users' metadata. Now, in previous years, we had declined the United States after the leaks that showed the extent of NSA surveillance. And what happened this year was very important because it was the first time that Congress passed limits on the activities of the NSA.
Freedom House reports only a dozen other countries have improved since June of last year, while internet freedom declined in more than a half of the 65 surveyed countries, representing close to 90% of the world's users. Zlatitsa Sahok, VOA News, Washington.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, President Barack Obama is traveling overseas. And now, before departing, he said he is carrying a message to leaders around the world that the incoming president wants to continue core relationships, including with NATO members. Obama will be meeting with global leaders during visits to Germany, Greece and Peru. Mary Alice Salinas reports from the White House.
President Barack Obama told journalists he's delivering a critical message to global leaders based on his recent conversation with President-elect Donald Trump. He said the future U.S. president wants to maintain core strategic relationships, including with NATO.
One of the messages I will be able to deliver is his commitment to NATO and the transatlantic alliance. I think that's one of the most important functions I can serve at this stage during this trip, is to let them know that there is no weakening of resolve.
Trump rattled NATO members when he suggested during the campaign that some must pay more for U.S. protection. Obama declined to comment on Trump's choice for top strategist, Stephen Bannon. Critics say the former head of the controversial outlet, Breitbart News, is linked to white nationalist groups. But Obama said the voters have spoken.
Donald Trump will be the next president, the 45th president of the United States. And it will be up to him to set up a team that he thinks will serve him well and reflect his policies. And those who didn't vote for him have to recognize that that's how democracy works.
Trump's November 8 victory sparked protests around the country. His win stunned Democrats.
I think it's a healthy thing for the Democratic Party to go through some reflection. I think it's important for me not to be bigfooting that conversation. I think we want to see new voices and new ideas emerge.
Obama said he urged Trump to reach out to voters who did not support him, saying it will make his job easier when he arrives in Washington. Mary Alice Salinas, VOA News, the White House.
As U.S. President-elect, Donald Trump works out who will be a part of his administration. Sources familiar with the situation say former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani is a leading candidate to be the country's next Secretary of State. Giuliani has experience as a federal prosecutor but does not have the foreign policy experience typical of those who have held the post. Giuliani was a fierce supporter of Trump's campaign, and the two men have long known each other. Another candidate reportedly being considered is John Bolton, a former ambassador to the United Nations. Trump has already named Republican Party Chairman Reince Priebus as his chief of staff, a position typically in charge of forging the president's agenda. But his choice of Stephen Bannon as his top strategist has drawn criticism from rights group Democrats and some Republicans. Bannon is celebrated by white nationalists and prior to joining Trump's campaign ran the far-right website Breitbart. Now, the first foreign leader to visit the United States since Donald Trump's election is Senegalese President Macky Sall. In an interview with VOA, the advocates a wait-and-see perspective, saying the new president's approach to Muslim allies may not match the anti-Islamic rhetoric of his campaign.
Je pense que le monde entier a suivi la campagne de M. Trump.
The whole world heard those comments during his campaign. They were often followed by an uproar easily understood. But I believe speeches of a candidate will be different from actions of a president, because a candidate tries to please voters. He's doing a kind of marketing of himself to obtain more votes. He says to people what they want to hear. It may not be what the president will do, because any action he takes will have immediate consequence. People will react immediately because no country, especially the United States, would like to isolate itself from the international community. Let's wait and see. Let's give him a presumption of innocence. Let him take over first before criticizing what he will or will not do.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Now, coming up, cervical cancer detection goes high-tech. Stay with us.
From Science and Technology, here's what's new.
Alexa, is it going to rain tomorrow in Stockholm?
It might rain in Stockholm, Sweden tomorrow. There's a 42% chance.
Could you set the alarm for 5 a.m.?
Alarm set for 5 a.m. tomorrow.
At the Emeraldton Hotel in Stockholm, manager Josephine Kleberg demonstrates how guests no longer have to call the front desk to check the weather, set an alarm, or find a taxi or restaurant thanks to Alexa. This voice-activated assistant is really a modified Echo made by Amazon. Kleberg says the Emeraldton Hotel is the first hotel in the world to use this technology as part of their room service.
You don't have to go down to the front desk. so you can just stay in your room and have the information.
Alexa may be only in this Swedish hotel for now, but it's not hard to imagine that this electronic concierge could appear in hotels all over the world in the not-too-distant future. For VOA's What's New, I'm Todd Grossantz.
I am Sheka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Well, about 500,000 women are diagnosed with cervical cancer around the world each year, as according to U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Most cases occur in developing countries where regular gynecological screenings are not widely accessible. But a new smartphone application developed in Tanzania is helping to change that. For VOA, Sophie Tremblay reports from Moshi.
For these women living on the foothills of Kilimanjaro, the burden of cervical cancer is all too familiar.
One day my aunt started to see a lot of liquid, like she was menstruating. When she went to the doctor, she was told it was cancer. And after that, she stayed at home and she died.
Every year, more than 4,000 women die from cervical cancer in Tanzania, despite the disease being preventable if precancerous lesions are detected in time and removed. Today, Frida and her neighbors have come to be examined for the first time as part of a new screening campaign. The exam involves a smartphone application called Cervical.
When I take the image, I can zoom it and see it in a good view, instead of going direct to the cervix and you can just see on the cervix. But when you take the image, you can zoom in and see if there's any lesion.
Health workers who aren't able to make diagnoses on their own use the app to send the photos to an expert in country who receives a notification. And in just a few minutes, the expert helps the worker on the scene make a diagnosis. The project leader and co-founder of the app's development says they've already trained over 100 health providers and screened thousands of women.
We predict that by the end of the year, we'll probably be up around 7,000 to 8,000.
Because the technology is mobile, she says her team will be able to reach even the remote parts of the country. Leila Umri came to the clinic after one of her friends told her about the experience.
It is important to come here to check my health so that I'm able to live many years and I can take good care of my children.
The team has already received numerous requests to export the technology to other African countries. Sophie Tremblay for VOA News in Moshi, Tanzania.
Well, the World Health Organization says about 300,000 babies are born with sickle cell disease every year. Now, researchers have proven that a new gene editing technique could pave the way toward a cure for the inherited genetic disease. VOA's Kevin Enochs reports.
Sickle cell anemia is a well-understood genetic disease that deforms oxygen-carrying blood cells.
We know exactly the mutation that causes the disease, and we know that if we correct that mutation, we will cure the disease.
While healthy blood cells are round, sickle cells are jagged like crescent moons and can get caught up in the bloodstream, causing pain and sometimes organ damage. Using a gene technique called CRISPR-Cas9, scientists from the University of California at Berkeley took stem cells from people with sickle cell disease, cut out the mutation, and replaced it with a healthy strand of DNA.
We engrafted the cells in the mouse for 4 months, and after 4 months, we took them out, and we looked at the levels of editing, and we were getting levels of editing consistent with achieving a clinical benefit in patients with sickle cell disease.
From here, the researchers will move ahead to ensure the gene editing process doesn't cause more genetic problems than it fixes, and then they have to prove that it's safe for humans. But if it works out, the technique could be expanded to a host of other well-understood genetic disorders. Kevin Enochs, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Why is a mask factory in Japan happy about Donald Trump's win? We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In South Africa, the main opposition party files a criminal complaint accusing President Zuma of corruption. In Morocco, UN Chief Ban Ki-moon voices hope that the U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will understand the urgency of climate change. In Cameroon, farmers blockade palm oil plantations run by Socfin, a subsidiary of the Bolloré Investment Group, demanding an end to land grabbing. In Nigeria, children uprooted by Boko Haram returned to schools in northern Nigeria after a military offensive drove the Islamist militant group from the territory. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. A factory in Japan is struggling to cope with orders for rubber masks of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. The director of the Ogawa studio in Saitama, north of Tokyo, said they are working non-stop to catch up with a flood of orders to produce masks of Trump following the presidential election. The factory is trying to produce as many as 350 masks a day, up from 45 before the vote. The factory is the only one in Japan that manufactures rubber masks. Well, next up, could the next piece of legal advice you receive be from a robot? Stanford University student and Do Not Pay founder Joshua Broder has invented what's claimed to be the world's first robot lawyer. Frustrated at having received several parking tickets, London-born Broder was driven to develop an automated system which helped appeal them. Now, the robot can even use Google Street View to include a picture of where the ticket was issued. The technology may seem limited, but even some of the world's largest law firms are experimenting with automation. Well, and finally, an Estonian inventor created a painting tool that allows the user to reproduce digital images of any surface. Spray printer's technology consists of wireless Bluetooth attachment that fits over a standard spray paint can and controls the flow of paint from the spray nozzle with a back-facing LED light that communicates with a mobile device. Now, the connected mobile device is mounted on a tripod facing the surface and ensures that layers of paint are sprayed only in the right places. This freestyle printer system works both indoors or outdoors and on large or small surfaces. And that is what is trending today. And that's our show for today. Now be sure to watch our Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords, where we teach you about words you might hear in the news.
Here is a word with two meanings. First, our example comes from an election story.
Supporters of Afghan presidential candidate Ashraf Ghani are dancing in the streets of Kabul. Preliminary runoff election results show him leading by 1 million votes. His supporters are elated.
A runoff is held if there is no clear winner after an election.
The second election includes only the top candidates.
Another meaning for runoff deals with the environment.
Runoff is water from rain or snow that flows down a hill or across the land.
Now, when you hear the word runoff, you will know what this news word means, and you can use it in a conversation.